The making of this video was prompted by many kind-hearted people reporting suffering dogs to the BC SPCA, with no discernible improvement resulting, or so little that the dog can't be said to no longer be suffering. Countless chained dogs in BC, some chained in sub-zero conditions, some with no protection from the cold or rain or heat, are still not being helped in a more meaningful way than the SPCA telling the owner to get a longer chain and clean up the feces. The SPCA frequently seizes for a lack of food, water, and shelter, but seems unable to relieve the far worse distress of a life of isolation. Suffering is one of the reasons in the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act for which a dog can be seized. In 2003, BC SPCA CEO Craig Daniel told animal advocates that he hoped to convince Crown that the word suffering can mean psychological suffering. If Crown accepted that it is possible to win in court on that definition, and in fact did win, it would set a precedent which could be used to seize other socially deprived dogs and charge the owners with cruelty. Mr. Daniel also told us that the danger is in setting a bad precedent by losing, and so the SPCA would have to choose its case carefully. But there are many dog experts in North America, the most famous actually living in Vancouver, who could be called to give expert testimony that psychological suffering is as bad or worse than a lack of food, water, and shelter. Has the SPCA asked Crown to use these experts? And has Crown declined to use these experts to convince a judge to rule that psychological suffering is suffering under the Act? Is that why we have never heard of a cruelty trial where expert witnesses are called to defend that interpretation of suffering? For about a year, the BC SPCA in Surrey was called by neighbours about this chained German Shepherd dog. A neighbour saw the SPCA come. 3 people were present when the dog's owners said that an SPCA inspector had come, who told them that if the SPCA ended up with the dog, they would have to put it down, and added that it was a good thing the chain was strong or the dog might harm someone if he got loose. Those words can be explained by the fact that in Surrey, as in some other BC municipalities, the SPCA is paid to protect the public from dogs. It is in fact the dog catcher. That appears to many people to be in conflict with the SPCA's generously supported mandate to protect dogs from people. There was no attempt by the SPCA to use the PCA Act to seize this dog and then to attempt to convince Crown to use suffering to mean such extreme psychological suffering that the SPCA believes the dog must be killed. That is the cruel catch-22 for chained dogs. There appears to be no meaningful legal help for them from the SPCA, and if they end up at an SPCA, they may be killed. There are fewer chained dogs and yard dogs in Vancouver since animal advocates reported more than 50 of them to City Council in 2001. Councillors were shocked when they saw our photos and read the stories. No one had ever told them that there was all that cruelty going on in so many Vancouver backyards. They instructed the SPCA to start being proactive, and very slowly things improved. But even now, in 2009, Animal Advocates is told of pitifully neglected yard dogs that have been reported to the SPCA, and little or nothing has changed. In towns outside Vancouver, and especially on farms, many dogs still suffer lives of boredom, anger, resignation, self-mutilation, depression, and despair. In the last few years, the SPCA ran a widely promoted End Cruelty Now campaign, which resulted in more statutory powers for it, but seemingly didn't give it the power to relieve the suffering of chained and isolated dogs. In 1998, Animal Advocates sent a chained dog report to every provincial MLA asking for the PCA Act to be amended to provide protection for these dogs. We received much support for our request from MLAs of all parties. But the SPCA told the government that there was no need for improvements to the Act. And so the changes that might have prevented more than a decade of suffering were quashed. Is the answer for there to be a new SPCA campaign, specifically to have animal lovers tell their MLAs how upset they will be if they don't pass legislation preventing one of the most hated cruelties in BC? The law needs to start speaking for chained dogs.